What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me today as always. If you like what you see here, do be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and there's plenty more content on the way. So I'm really excited to show you today the Sig Sauer P320 X5 series. This is one of 3 different models that came out earlier this year, right around SHOT Show, and this is their, I guess they're calling it their premier 320 in terms of all of the bells and whistles that come on it. So of course we're going to spend some time going over the stats of this firearm and some of the different features that come on it, some things that I really like about it. There are a couple things that maybe I'm not quite as fond of. We'll compare it a little bit to another P320 towards the end of the video because there are definitely some big differences with this between the normal line, if you will. And of course we'll look at some shooting and give a little bit of a shooting analysis along the way, take a look a little bit at the trigger, and just look overall at this firearm and some of the different things that come with it. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So again, this is the X5 series. It is unloaded. I do have an unloaded magazine in here as usual. So let's go ahead and knock a couple of specs out of the way here real quick. The overall length, and this is approximate. Sig Sauer doesn't actually report a few of the stats for this firearm on their website, which was kind of interesting, but I'm coming up with approximately 8.7 inches overall length, and that's including this beaver tail. The overall height is 6.5 inches, and this is including the extended magazine that comes with it. So it's going to be a little bit closer to 6 inches without that magazine. The overall width of the firearm is 1.35 inches, and that's including these extended slide lock or slide release tabs here, and I'll talk more about those. Now, if you include the flared magwell down at the bottom, which again I'll talk about in a moment, the width would be more like 1.162 inches. The barrel on this, and this is a bull barrel, which I'll give you a little bit of a look on. This is going to be a 5-inch barrel, and it's pretty substantial for sure. It's got a little bit of grease on it right now, but it's a pretty substantial barrel and kind of a cool looking stainless barrel. It does have the Sig Sauer printing on the side. Hopefully you can see that okay, as well as 9mm. The finish on the gun is the standard Sig Sauer Nitron finish. So that's the overall stats of the firearm in terms of its length and width and all that kind of good stuff. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the features of this firearm, and we'll go ahead and talk from the bottom up, and I'll come back to the magazine here in just a moment. It does, like I said, include a flared magwell on it. Now, this is a removable magwell, so you can take an Allen wrench and you can take this magwell off. And it does also have, and you're probably not going to be able to see this very well, it's tough to capture this in the light, but there actually is a weight in there as well towards or along the back strap to give it just a little bit more balance when you're holding it. Now, as we move up on the grip, one of the biggest differences between the X series, not only this one, but its 2 other brothers, and I'll maybe mention those in a little bit. Sadly, I don't have them. I wish I did. But they have recontoured the grips, and I both like, and there are a couple things about it that I actually dislike. However, as far as what they've done to it, not only from a recontouring, they've done a bit of an undercut here under the trigger guard, and they've also cut it a little bit more up right by the beaver tail, which also is extended, to allow you to get a little bit higher up purchase on it. Now, a lot of people say that Sig Sauers have a little bit higher bore axis than some other guns. And although that's true, I haven't really ever paid that much mind to that. I think the theory is correct, but you know, if you enjoy shooting a gun, regardless of how tall it is, it just is what it is. But again, they've made those modifications to help that just a little bit. The grip texture on this, which does go all the way around front, back, and sides, is just a tiny bit more aggressive than the standard P320. Now, I've always said that the P320 has a really good grip. It's soft enough where it's comfortable, but it's grippy enough to where the gun stays in hand. But they have enhanced this just a little bit. So there's a little bit of extra grip in there. Now, I'm going to come back to the grip here in just a moment with one thing that I don't necessarily care for entirely too much. Now, it does have your standard Sig Sauer mag release, and it is changeable for left-handed shooters. And it does have your slide lock, slide release, which once again is ambidextrous for left-handed shooters. And like I said a moment ago, it is slightly extended from your standard P320 current generation. So it's out just, or flare just a little bit more. However, your takedown lever is the same Gen 2 or version 2 that we're all coming to know for sure. Now, the frame also does have an accessory rail for lights, lasers, and grenade launchers, as expected. Although this gun is more geared towards competition, perhaps there aren't going to be quite as many accessories hung from these, but the fact is you can do it, so kind of nice. So in terms of the slide, again with this nitron finish, several things going on here. It does have front and back serrations. However, the serrations are angled just a little bit more, and according to Sig, they are to match the angle of the grip there a little bit. So I thought that was interesting. So they've done a little bit of a modification. They are certainly very usable. I think they do a great job, and I have found that actually the slide is relatively easy to actuate. The spring is not so firm that it's difficult to make that slide work. Now, also on the slide, you do have lightning cuts here to reduce the weight just a little bit. So we've got a little extra weight in the back and the grip, and it's reduced in the front, although the bull barrel does add a little bit of weight. But again, that, at least in principle, is to help keep this a balanced gun. Now, the overall weight of this gun, and I hadn't mentioned that just yet, so we're kind of at that point now, is 34.46 ounces, or at least that's what I'm getting on my digital scale. So this is not necessarily the lightest gun. Might not be good for pocket carry or anything like that. However, more power to you if you want to do that. Still with the slide, a couple of other things. It does have a removable plate here for an RMR. Now, right now, it is specific to the Romeo R1, or Romeo 1 rather, sight. And perhaps there could be some aftermarket plates that are created to allow for you to put maybe a Vortex or a Burris or a Trichicon, something like that. But for the time being, at least, it's the Romeo 1. Now, in terms of your sights, and I'll try and line this up for you here a little bit, it does come with Dawson Precision sights here, and the front is going to be a relatively thin fiber optic, although I actually really like this sight lineup. And then the back is a serrated and adjustable for windage and elevation sight. Now, I also found, and again, I'll be wheeling in all the shooting and all that here momentarily, I found, at least in the beginning, that this shot relatively low, so definitely did some adjusting on the back sight. I wish the sight would actually go up just a little bit more, because I still feel like even after all of the adjustments, it still shoots a tiny bit low, although again, you can definitely get used to that. So overall, from a feature standpoint and from a spec standpoint, it really is a very well put together firearm, and they certainly threw the kitchen sink, so to speak, at this with all the different upgrades. So let's talk a little bit more about the grip here for just a moment or two. Now, I do have another P320 here with me. This is a compact RX, and I know from a size standpoint, this is not a very good comparison, but the only reason I'm bringing this up here for just a moment is to get a little bit of a look at that grip texture, first and foremost, again, with the X5 being just a little bit more aggressive, not by a lot, but by a little, than the standard frame. And then the one other thing that is a little bit different, and hopefully you can see this okay, I'll try and line these up for you and get my hand out of the way. The P320 RX on the right, if you'll notice that it's actually indented as we move up the frame, and it's got these little contours on both sides, and I imagine that that's really to help have your allow your thumb to have somewhere to rest while you're shooting, or just gripping the firearm, whereas the X5 does not do that. The X5 keeps the same contour all the way up the grip. Now, my hands are big enough to where this is not uncomfortable. However, I actually would have preferred that they indent this just a little bit, because I think the grip on the regular P320 is actually pretty fantastic. I'm a big fan. I think this is a very comfortable firearm. Not to say that the X5 isn't, but I think they did a great job with just the regular P320. So we'll go ahead and put that guy away. But overall, again, from a fit and finish standpoint, from a feature standpoint, I think Sig did a pretty good job. Now, the MSRP on this gun is going to come in right around $1,000. Your street price is going to be somewhere, I would imagine, in the $900 mark, maybe $950 or maybe a little under $900. But it's pretty new, pretty hard to find right now. So I imagine they're going to command a pretty good price for the time being. So we'll come back to the trigger here in just a moment, but we'll go ahead and take a look at the magazine. Now it does come with 4 21-round magazines, and they've done a little bit of modification to the magazine, and I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but they've actually tapered off the bottom part of the magazine, and that's to help insert the magazine and fit properly into the X series grip. I believe this is the same extended magazine that is used for the TAC Ops model. Please feel free to correct me in the comments, but I'm pretty sure it is. But your standard older extended magazines that are out there over the last several years, they are not going to work in this gun, unfortunately. They have to have this taper on it. But it's really nice that you have 4 21-round magazines that come in the box with the firearm. That adds to a little bit of value with that, again, that MSRP being $1,000. But 4 magazines, and SIG magazines can be pretty expensive. It's nice that you get that. So that's an overall look at the gun. Of course, the takedown is just like a normal P320. Lock the slide back, and then you would swing your takedown lever, and it slides right off. Nothing special there. In terms of removing the plate here to put on a Romeo, you do actually have to get to it from the bottom. And I'm not going to be able to show that very well, unfortunately, in the light, regardless of taking the gun apart or not. But there are a couple of screws there that you would undo. I'm not necessarily sure I'm a fan of that. However, it does make it look a little bit cleaner up top. So let's go ahead and take a look at a little bit of shooting at the X5 and see how it does. All right, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that footage at the range. So from a shooting perspective, aside from it shooting a little bit low, especially in the beginning, and I did show that footage, it really is a very good shooter. I mean, it's certainly a heavier gun, but if you're into shooting heavier guns like maybe a Shadow 2 or something like that that's going to weigh a little bit more, an all-steel gun, this just fits right in that same category, although it has the advantage of being a striker-fired, if that's what you're after. Of course, nothing wrong with a hammer-fired gun either. So from a trigger perspective or trigger standpoint, one thing that's a little bit unusual or unique about the X5, they included a flat trigger. Now this is not the Apex trigger or the version 2 Apex trigger that's now out on the market. I believe this is Sig's own brand, or perhaps they marketed it out to another company. Feel free to chime in on that in the comments if you have any comments about that. But it is a flat trigger, and I have found that that aside from it basically being a standard P320 feeling trigger from from kind of a thud standpoint, and I'll go into that here in just a moment, it does seem to be a little bit lighter, and the trigger gauge is measuring it a little bit lighter as well. So we'll test that for a moment or two, but we'll go ahead and pull the trigger a couple of times and see how it does. So with being a flat trigger, there's going to be just a little bit less travel in it because you're going pretty much straight back, and you should be able to pull the trigger from basically anywhere rather than having to curve down on a lot of the polymer triggers that are out there right now. But when we pull our trigger, there's just about maybe 1.5 millimeters of travel, and then we get to our wall. And there's our brake, and it is very much a standard Sig brake because we have the same trigger module that's in all of the other P320s. And then from a reset standpoint, the reset's about maybe 2.5, 3 millimeters, something like that. Clearly, I'm not not the best judge of length, but it's right about 2 millimeters or so out. And once again, very standard feeling P320. So we'll go ahead and do that again. So there's our uptake. It's relatively short. Our wall. And our brake, that kind of thud rather than a real snap with some other guns. Not to say that that's bad. And there's our reset. It's a nice audible tactile reset. And then you're back to the start. So overall, I would say that this trigger is great. I mean, I like the P320 trigger as well. Just the standard trigger on it, no apex or anything like that. So this really is an improvement on already a pretty good trigger, even though the P320 is a little bit heavy in terms of triggers. So we'll go ahead and test this 1 or 2 times. I've had a couple of commenters give me some feedback on testing the triggers or some suggestions on making it better, which I very much appreciate. So we're going to lay this on the table and give it a try that way and see how it does. So we'll go ahead and try this just a couple of times. All right, so we've got 5 pounds, 11.7 ounces. I'll do this 1 or 2 more times here. Okay, 5 pounds, 8 ounces. We'll do 1 more. Still pretty good. A couple of other P320s that I've tested have come in around the 6.5, almost 7 pound mark. So a little bit of an improvement there, I think largely because of that flat face trigger. And then 5 pounds, 7.9 ounces. So reasonably consistent at around 5.5 pounds, maybe just a little bit over. I've tested it off camera a couple of times, and it came in a little bit lower than that, but not by much. So again, reasonably consistent. But overall, again, I'd say that the X5 is a pretty fantastic firearm. Certainly for the money, you're getting a lot of features and a lot of, well, if you look at it this way, improvements or at least variations on already a great gun, the P320. I'm definitely a fan of that. The one thing, again, I would have liked to have seen would have been a little bit more contour in the grip for your thumb, because if you've got smaller hands, this would probably be a pretty big gun to hold on to. Now, I know that they have other grip frames that either are out there or coming out there if we're able to find them, and they will probably have a small grip frame, although I don't know that for sure, but they probably will. That might help a little bit, but again, overall, it's a really neat firearm and some pretty cool features and a lot of fun to shoot at the range. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about this, what your comments are, questions are, that sort of thing. Maybe suggestions for some if I could only have one videos. That'd be cool. And otherwise, look forward to talking with you again. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.